Welcome to Seniority Authority, the podcast where I track down experts to answer your questions on aging. I'm your host, Kathleen Toomey. Let's get smarter about growing older. Would you like to change your life? Would you like to be happier, more resilient, and better able to deal with the curveballs life throws at you? I know I would. So I wonder, what could do that? What could help anyone be happier, more content, and less thrown by the things life throws at us? Today's guest has the answer. Why shouldn't she? She's a TV producer, magazine editor, author of multiple books, has interviewed presidents and celebrities. Why shouldn't she be grateful? Yet, as journalist Janice Kaplan discovered in her year-long project, it's not about what you have. It's about how you practice gratitude. It's my pleasure to welcome to Seniority Authority Janice Kaplan, author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Gratitude Diaries. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit retirement communities, where active adults find community, purpose, and peace of mind. Visit riverwoodsgroup.org. Now, let's hear from today's guest. Welcome to the podcast, Janice.
Hi, so nice to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, I've looked forward to this for so long, ever since I read your book, and so grateful that you're here with us today. So, Janice, you have a career to be envied. Editor of Parade magazine for years, TV producer, successful author, as well as mom to two great sons. Can you tell our listeners why you feel the need to start a year of self-reflection and gratitude?
Well, thank you for that. And yes, I did have and do have a great life and a great career. But when we're living in our own lives, we often tend to look at the things that are going wrong rather than looking at the things that are going right. And I don't think I was completely aware of that until I did leave as the editor of Parade magazine, which had been a wonderful job. And I was asked by a large foundation to do a survey, a national survey on gratitude. And that just sounded like kind of a fun thing to do. So I did this survey with a very well-known pollster. It was a big survey and the results started coming in. And a couple of the results really jumped out at me. First, we asked people, do you think grateful people are happier? And about 95% of people said, absolutely, grateful people are happier. And in fact, your listeners right now, think about it yourselves. Do you think grateful people are happier? And then we asked people, do you have people that you're grateful for? Are you grateful for family and friends? Once again, think about it yourself. If you say yes, you're right up there with the 90 or 95% of people who said absolutely grateful for family and friends. And then we asked a different question. We said, do you express gratitude? And all of a sudden, the number plunged. And suddenly we had less than half the people saying that they expressed gratitude. And it suddenly occurred to me that we have what I began to call the gratitude gap. We have something that we know is going to make us happier, but we simply don't do it. And because, as you said, I'm a journalist, I've been a TV producer, I got to go on the Today Show and lots of other places and talk about the gratitude gap. And then at some point, actually, it was on a New Year's Eve, it occurred to me that I was probably as guilty of the gratitude gap as anybody else. And I thought, wouldn't that be interesting? I wonder what would happen if I spent more time living gratefully. And I decided to challenge myself and see it started as just a little bit of an exercise, a little bit of a literary exercise to see what would happen if I spent a year living more gratefully. And I get so excited to talk about it because I ended up with probably the best year of my life.
Wow, that's saying something.
It really is. And nothing big happened that year. Nothing big changed that year. But simply thinking about gratitude every day, simply thinking about what I was grateful for, looking at the positive of everything, really gave me an extraordinary year. And as I said, I love talking about it because I know all of your listeners can end up having the best year of their lives too.
Wow, that sounds so exciting. You know, one of the things that I noticed in your book is that there's a statistic from the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology that said people could feel, and I love this, 18.5% happier if they felt more grateful. So did you also want to feel more grateful? Is that one of the reasons that you started your year of gratitude?
I love psychological studies because they always have numbers like we'll be 18.5% happy. I never quite understand where they get those. But,
I don't either.
But of course it is encouraging, and we all want to be, roughly 20% happier. I think what's interesting about that number is that it also made me be a little bit aware of the difference between happiness and gratitude.
That is something I would love to talk about.
Well, sure. The idea of being happier is very appealing, whether it's 18.5% or what. Being that much happier is a good thing. But happiness can also be very fleeting. If I have an ice cream cone, I'm happy. If I step out on a sunny day and I get a chocolate bar, I'm happy too. Obviously, I like to eat. Happiness, as I said, is very fleeting and is very dependent on outside circumstances. And if you're reliant on outside circumstances, that happiness is going to go up and down. That percentage is going to go up and down. What gratitude does that's different is gratitude gives you control. Gratitude gives you the power to say that whatever the circumstance is, whatever the situation is, I'm going to make myself happier. I'm going to find the good in it. And so I think gratitude ups your happiness quotient probably more than anything, because the only person gratitude is reliant on is you. And it doesn't matter the circumstances.
I love that. I love anything that has to do with control, because I am a control enthusiast, not a control freak. So that's really fascinating how you describe that. Happiness comes from outside circumstances. Gratitude kind of comes from within and is in your control. It is how you decide you're going to approach different situations. Does that also connect with one of I know our listeners are going to absolutely want your book, The Gratitude Diaries, and there is a link to purchase that in our show notes, and I would highly recommend it. But you talk about people reframing what happens to them, which I think sometimes we have to do in order to be grateful. We have to reframe. Can you describe what that looks like?
Absolutely. So the idea of reframing is to quite literally look at something from a different perspective, to turn it around a little bit. And let me give you an example, a sort of sad example. A colleague of mine, after the book came out, who I met, told me that she had kept a gratitude journal for 17 years. And I said, "Are you kidding?"
Oh my gosh.
And she didn't seem like the type. She had been one of my editors at Parade. And as we were talking, she said, "Gosh, I wonder what I wrote in my journal the night my mother died." And she went back, and she was kind enough. She must be more organized than I am, because she found that journal and she found the page, and she called me the next day and she read it to me. And her mother had died quite young. And what my colleague had written in her journal that day was first her sadness about the events. And then she was a gratitude journal. So she had to find something positive to say. And she said, "I'm so grateful that I have my dad and my sister here with me to help me through this hard time." And I was so touched by that, because it seemed to me the perfect definition of what gratitude is. Again, it doesn't get rid of the bad stuff. It wasn't going to bring, sadly enough, her mom back. But it was something that was going to give her a little sense of light, a little sense of how to find a way to move forward. And it's very easy to stop in a bad time and only see the sadness. And gratitude says, okay, there's got to be a good side to this. Let's find what the positive is. And, in my life, gratitude was bringing things from good to better, as you suggested at the beginning. And as I've toured the country with this book and spoken to so many people, I'm really in awe of the people who have been able to reframe truly terrible situations, illness, death, terrible family situations, and to talk to me about how gratitude has helped them and how they've been able to find something good in the situation. Now, these are very dramatic examples. You can also reframe something in just the very simplest way. My husband did it the other night. He had come home from work. He was stuck in traffic. It was an hour and a half getting home, the kind of thing that would frustrate and drive anybody crazy. But he has learned the gratitude reframing spirit. In fact, I think it comes pretty naturally to him. And I said, "Oh, honey, you must have had such a terrible drive home. And he said, no, actually, you know what? I'm really listening to a great book on Audible. And I was kind of glad to have the extra time to be in the car. So yeah, I'm actually kind of grateful that I had that traffic. I got in 2 chapters. And I thought, that's perfect. You can't change the traffic. All you can do is try to find the positive side to it. And by the way, if you're in a situation where you can change something, change it. Gratitude doesn't say you have to be happy for whatever's there. If you can change things and make the circumstance, the situation better, go for it. If you can't, that's the time to call in the reframing.
Oh, that's a really important piece, is to remain in control and change what you can. And we talk a lot about this on this podcast, about change and how people are afraid of change, but it is not necessarily a bad thing. And change is going to happen to all of us. So why not control the change if you can? There are debates about how many positive statements it takes to counteract negative statements. Some researchers say 5, some say 3. Can you talk a little bit about how does this gratitude practice work? And do you have to keep reframing and restating this until it becomes a habit or until it becomes a real practice?
Well, I think a lot of psychologists and some evolutionary biologists say that we are wired to look for the negative. And I think that's what you're referring to when you say that it takes 3 or 5 positive statements to counteract 1 bad one.
Yes.
And I think we're all aware of that in our own lives. You can have a really good day, but one bad thing happens. And what is it that you remember? What is it that you talk to your friends about that night? What is it that you lie in bed thinking about? It's usually the bad one. You see it with kids coming home from school with their report cards. They get 4 A's and 1 C in math. And what's the first comment? Hi, having a little trouble in math, aren't you? So gratitude says, yeah, that C is going to be there. Yeah, that one bad thing that happened is there, but let's also focus on the positive things. And yes, sometimes it does take more than one positive thing to counteract that one negative one from the day that you're remembering, but try to balance it out in your own mind, in the comments that you make to somebody else. People who are working experience it all the time. Your boss says one negative thing and it can ruin your day, even if she's told you the rest of the week how terrific you are. So I think all of us have to be very careful about the negative things we say to others and realizing the impact that they have, but also to recognize that then trying to mediate it with positivity, both to ourselves and to others, is really important.
You're exactly right. And we are wired to think about the bad thing, not all the good things. In several places in your book, you talk about the phenomena of habituation, whether it's being habituated to your husband, to something that you just bought. In your case, you bought a collection of kitchen bowls that you loved, and then you're like, oh, these are just kitchen bowls. Can you explain to our listeners what habituation is and how that impacts gratitude?
Sure. We often think about something that is going to make us happier, something that is going to make our lives better. If only I had a bigger house, a nicer diamond ring, a better something, prettier kitchen bowls.
Again, something outside ourselves.
Right. There's always something that we can up the ante to, and that's going to be the thing that we really want. And you want it, and you want it, and you want it, and then you get it, and then you just get used to it. I refer to it in the book as the Porsche in the garage syndrome, after a friend of mine in Los Angeles who desperately wanted to get a Porsche. And all he could talk about was how much he wanted his Porsche. And then he sold a screenplay and he went ahead and bought that Porsche. And yes, the first day he was so excited to have the Porsche. But after a while, he got a speeding ticket. He got a traffic ticket. He had to change the oil. After a while, it was just the car in the garage. And who gets excited about the car in the garage? So what can you do? Well, you can keep trying to up the ante. You can trade in your Porsche for a Lamborghini. You can keep trying to get something bigger and bigger. But the point is that it's always going to hit that same stage of habituation. And so that's when it becomes really important to say, again, not just to accept what you have. Maybe there is something else out there that you want, and that's fine, but to also appreciate what you have when you have it right now. And that doesn't mean you can't want something else. It doesn't mean you can't still be ambitious and eager for something else, but it does say, I'm going to appreciate what I have and enjoy it and love it. And when it changes, that'll be great. But right now, this is it. I found habituation particularly important at the beginning of the book when I started deciding I was going to appreciate my husband more. Because, by the way, I think Porsches are easier to trade in than husbands.
Infinitely easier to trade, and more people want the Porsches. We all find personal relationships challenging, and our ones that are closest to us are the ones we probably appreciate the least. If you're getting smarter, help us reach more minds. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends to follow us on social or subscribe to our newsletter at seniorityauthority.org. In your research, you found that gratitude also affects health. Specifically, what is the impact of a gratitude practice?
I was stunned by how much gratitude affects health. There've been a lot of good studies showing that gratitude decreases stress, lowers blood pressure, helps you sleep better. And we shouldn't really be surprised anymore at the connections between body and mind. We all know that on some level. If you're anxious, you may get a stomachache or you may get a headache. And gratitude just turns out to change some of the hormones in the endocrine system. It just changes how your body is reacting to things. I tell the story in the book about the fact that I had migraine headaches for many years before I started working on this book. And one of the people I interviewed at the book was a very well-known doctor who does mind-body connections. And we talked about what I was going to do, the kind of stress-releasing things I was going to do next time I got a migraine headache. And I was kind of excited to get my next migraine headache. So I had to work. And after a few months, I called him and I said, you know what? This is crazy. I haven't had a headache since we spoke. What do you think is going on? And he said, Janice, I'm not surprised at all. You are spending every day and every moment thinking about gratitude. Your stress hormones are in a completely different place than they've been before. Just thinking differently changes your body, changes your system. And there are very intricate connections between body and mind. The research on it is just fascinating. And whenever we have a pain, we look for the physical source of it. So much of our pain also has an emotional source to it, also has a mental source to it. All pain comes through the brain, right? And if we can change those circuits, we can very much change how we feel, how our blood pressure is, how our stress levels are. And as I said, sleep better too.
That's just so fascinating. And I love just talking about the fact that there is a direct impact in so many different ways and so many different research studies. Your mind is such a powerful thing that is the control panel of your body. And we don't use it enough to do that. Let's talk about what your year looked like. So you decided on New Year's Eve, you're going to start this year of gratitude. Talk to our listeners about, like, literally, what did you do differently and how did that look?
Well, as I said before, I started by being more grateful to my husband. And part of that is that I think we often tend to be very critical of the people we love and of others too. It's much easier to be critical sometimes than to be accepting. And so I started that way by spending a weekend and deciding that I was just not going to say anything negative to my husband in the whole weekend. And I hadn't told him yet what I was doing. And it was quite surprising how in the course of the weekend, his attitude changed and he started responding and saying thank you to me about things. And without my having to say anything, just giving that gift of appreciation to somebody else, they just naturally give it back to you. And then, of course, I told him what I was doing and it became a fun exercise for the rest of the year. By the way, I had thought at that point that being grateful to my husband for the first month would be more than enough.
This is good. You get You get January.
Yeah, January, exactly. But it turned out to be so successful that I kept it up for the whole year. And in fact, I've kept it up or tried to keep it up all these years since. And, that doesn't mean that you never get mad. It doesn't mean that you don't get frustrated, but it does mean that you can stop and go, what am I doing? And is this how I want to be? And is this the feeling that I want to bring into my home and my life? And how can I change that? I spent some time being grateful at work and trying to figure out how to change the feeling at work. It turns out people are less grateful at work than any place else. And that's the shame. For those of your listeners who are still working or have children or colleagues who are, instilling some gratitude into the workplace can start to make a big difference. I found myself trying to be more grateful to my sister, somebody with whom I didn't have a bad relationship. I just sort of didn't have much relationship at all. And we had, as siblings often do, old grievances that we held against each other. And so everything that you say pushes a button about something else. And I live in New York. I actually took a train down to Washington for what was going to be our gratitude weekend together. And I said, let's just start by thinking about something that each of us has done, however long ago it was, that made you grateful, that we appreciate about each other. And, we each came up with, for her, they were almost silly things, but they were the things that when we thought of what makes my sister special to me, it was something she had done when, I was 8. And for her, it was something I had done when I had flown down another time when she was having a difficulty and came to be with her. And I said, good, let's start from there. And that became the point of that's what our relationship will be about. Those two elements, not all of the negative things that we can remember. Those are gone. Let's just sweep those away and let's start from the position of gratitude and appreciation. And again, that was a huge change that has impacted our relationship ever since and has kept us as friends in a way we never had been before.
Wow. I'm fascinated by the fact that you started by saying you started this practice with your husband without telling him what you were doing. During your year, how open were you with people about the practice of being gratitude? Did you say it first and then do it, or did you do it and then eventually reveal it to them? And I'm thinking of our listeners, like what's the best strategy to just say, I'm practicing gratitude and then put it out there in the world and then follow up, or do it quietly and see if anyone notices or see if you notice?
It's an interesting question. I've not really thought of it that way before. I think that if you're trying to change yourself and become a more grateful person and you're aware that you need help with it, tell the people closest to you about it. Say, you know what? I think I'm kind of a crank. And I don't like that. It doesn't make me happy and it doesn't make anybody else happy. I want to be more grateful and I'm going to try and I want you to help me. And it was actually enormously helpful to have my husband in on the game with me because I don't know how many times in the course of the year and ever since he would say to me, hey, Ms. Gratitude. Is that really what you want to say? Or to
that person who's pouring you a cup of coffee, and got it wrong.
I think to those close to you, if you need help or if you want their support, it's not a bad thing to enlist them on your side. In the world in general, I think if you just put out the gratitude, you're going to feel it. I had a friend, actually the pollster who did that initial poll with me, who was very dubious about the idea of gratitude throughout the whole thing. And at some point during the year, he called me and he said, I've started to do what you've said. And I say thank you to store clerks. And I'm really grateful to people who help me when I'm buying a suit. And he said, I'm starting to feel like it's cheating because you get so much back for putting out so little.
Wow.
And I think that it sort of made me laugh, but I think it is true that if you find yourself just being grateful to people in everyday life and the smallest things, it'll probably make them feel better. But the big secret is that it's going to make you feel better too. Because when you're rude to somebody, you feel kind of lousy afterwards. It just leaves that bad feeling. And if you make yourself stop and think, you know what, maybe he's having a bad day too. Maybe there's a reason that he's being rude or whatever. And you say something nice and you say something grateful, or you thank somebody for their help, or you thank somebody for trying, even if they couldn't help you. Possibly it's going to make their day better, but it's definitely going to make your day better, because saying that you're going to feel the stress go out of you. You're going to feel the anger go out of you. And it's just going to put you in a whole much better position.
And I tell you, there couldn't be a better time to do this with the stress in workforces now and everyone being understaffed and out in the world, in the workplace, and wherever you're shopping or visiting or trying to do business, there's not enough people. And so people start the situation by being frustrated and then escalate to angry. So I think this would be a perfect time to try that in the world. I'm getting really excited about this. And I know that a lot of our listeners have written journals before, as have I, but a gratitude diary is different. How did your gratitude diary differ from your journals? And I know you had a friend who had a recommendation of what to do, how to find one. But what do you suggest our listeners do if they decide, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start a gratitude diary? What should they do?
I think the first thing is to remember that gratitude should never feel like a chore. And I think to some people, saying that they're going to write a journal or keep a diary sounds like, oh, that's one more thing to do. I'm already busy. And gratitude should never feel that way. So here's what I would suggest. I think you can make it really simple. I think you can put a scrap of paper next to your bed and tell yourself that every night for the next week, you're going to write down one thing that made you grateful today. One thing. Who can't do that? Doesn't have to be an essay, just has to be a few words. So how is that going to work? Well, you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to have your first cup of coffee. And you're going to say, wow, that coffee was good. Oh, I know. Grateful for coffee, done for the day. And that's okay, because it has put you in a positive frame of mind. It's given you that sense of starting your day with gratitude. And maybe we'll give you a little change for the rest of the day. And then that night, when you see that scrap of paper next to your bed, you're going to write that down. And that's going to be how you remember your day. Or alternatively, it's going to get to be 4:00 in the afternoon. You've had a terrible day. You haven't been grateful for anything. And all of a sudden, you're going to remember that silly scrap of paper that Janice told you have to have next to your bed. And what are you possibly going to write on it? So you're going to stop. You're just going to physically stop and you're going to look around and you're going to go, okay, I'm grateful that I have this nice friend here next to me. I'm grateful that I live in a pretty place. I'm grateful that I have people who support me. I'm grateful that it's a pretty day here in New Hampshire. And again, it's going to change the tenor of how you feel. It's going to change your attitude for that moment. And it's surprising how powerful that moment can be. And once again, that night, when you have that slip of paper, you're going to write down what you thought about. And once again, it's going to give that positive tinge to your day. And I think if you try that for a week, if you just keep that scrap of paper next to your bed for a week, knowing that you're going to write down one thing each time, it's very powerful. And it's going to start teaching you how to reframe. It's going to start teaching you and reminding you to be able to do that. If you want to go on for something bigger and do a gratitude journal, I did it for a very long time. And I would just write a paragraph or a couple of sentences every day, only about positive things, only about things that I was grateful for. The difference is that often many of us, especially writers like me, when you keep a journal, it's all about the angst and anxiety and terrible things that are going on. The gratitude journal is only about joy. It's only about good things. And when you do have those down moments later, you can flip through your gratitude journal and go, oh yeah, I guess life isn't so bad. I guess there are all these great moments that I did have.
That's terrific. That is great, because I know there are some people, I love to write, but there are some people that abhor the idea of writing, or a journal or a diary is intimidating. So I love the scrap of paper. I think that's terrific. In fact, you've had so much success in this gratitude practice that you came up with a 7-day gratitude challenge that you detail in the book to help jumpstart the gratitude practice.
Yeah, the idea is just to do something different every day, to one day be grateful to somebody unexpected, to be grateful in public about something. And, when you mentioned that sometimes people don't like to write, how about if one day, or maybe you could even replace the whole week with it, take a picture. You have your phone, you're always snapping pictures of things. Make one picture every day a gratitude picture that you're going to take. People complain about social media being negative. Turn social media around to make it positive and do your week of gratitude, post it on Instagram or whatever you do of a picture that you're grateful for, of something different that you're grateful for every day. Find a way to make gratitude interesting and unexpected for yourself. And I think that keep it interesting, keep it fun, and keep it simple. And surprise yourself while you're surprising other people with it too.
That is great advice. And I totally agree about social media. Social media could use an injection of gratitude, that's for sure. You have this best-selling book and it is taken off, thank God, because this is great positive energy in the world. What's next for you?
Well, thanks. Yeah, the book has done well and continues to, and it's a thrill to get to hear from people about reading the book and what it's meant to them. So I hope if any of your listeners do have the chance to read it, come to my website. Let me know what you think. I love to hear other people's stories. I wrote another book after it called The Genius of Women that came out just around COVID time, and which is a book that I'm very proud of. And I think your listeners would also enjoy, about women from the past and present who have overcome obstacles and how they've achieved success despite all of the problems in their way. I approach it in the same way I did the Gratitude Diaries, from this very positive perspective. And the book I'm working on right now is in some ways a follow-up to the Gratitude Diaries. It's a bit about what we were speaking about before in terms of mind-body connections. It's about figuring out how to use your body to make yourself happy. And we tend to think of happiness and gratitude as only coming from our minds. What can we do so that our whole selves are involved? And how can we put ourselves in the places and recognize the physical changes that are going to bring happiness? So I'm working on that one right now and having a lot of fun.
That sounds terrific. I love that. So we have a link to The Genius of Women also in our show notes, and a link to Janice's website so we can stay tuned for when that next book comes out. Okay, so we already know that you're a very grateful person, a talented writer and producer, super smart, great mom. Let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us, and you gave a hint earlier, tell us what your favorite guilty pleasure is.
Well, it's probably, I'm not sure what I hinted at before. Oh, ice cream. Was that what I hinted at before?
Yeah.
Well, that definitely counts as a guilty pleasure. Absolutely. Every night that counts as a guilty pleasure. But when you asked it just now, I was thinking that it's also reading old mystery novels. Nothing makes me happier than getting into bed at night and finding an old Rex Stout, an old Agatha Christie, an old Sherlock Holmes, anything like that always keeps me entertained. And if there's a dish of ice cream with it, of course, that would be even better.
That sounds like a perfect combination, reading and ice cream. What's your favorite healthy practice?
Well, despite the ice cream, I actually do eat very well. And I exercise a lot and I swim a lot, and swimming makes me very happy. I think when you find an exercise that you just truly enjoy, I used to be a runner, but that gets a little hard on the knees, as you know. And I discovered swimming a couple of years ago, and I just usually can't wait to get into the pool when I have a chance.
Oh, and it's wonderful because it supports all of your joints while you're doing that. So that's a great practice. What's guaranteed to make you laugh, Janice?
It's actually, say, my husband.
That's terrific.
We do have a way of, I could try to repeat the silly things we say to each other, but they're just those kind of silly jokes that longtime married people have. And I can always rely on him to make me laugh when I'm too serious about something and to come up with something. So I'm very lucky because of that.
That's wonderful. Tell us, what is the last book that you loved?
Well, I'll tell you who I'm reading right now is Annie Ernaux, who just won the Nobel Prize, the French writer.
Right.
Her books, I had never read her before. And so I've now read, I think, 3 of her books. They're very short. She writes about 100-page books. The one I just read is called Simple Passion. They are kind of stunning and shocking, but really wonderful and intriguing, and not an obvious choice to have won the Nobel Prize, but I highly recommend her. Very, very interesting writer.
Wonderful. I have not read her either, so I will dig in. And last of all, what's your favorite escape?
Well, I guess on a daily basis, as I said, my favorite escape would be reading, but on a bigger way, my favorite escape is Paris. Um, we just came back from a wonderful week of just walking and looking and seeing art and indulging. And I've been to Paris many times, and you can never be unhappy in Paris. So
that's wonderful.
Getting away to someplace special is always very important to me.
Yeah, and especially after the COVID times, international travel is such a treat that I think we don't take for granted anymore.
Well, was truly grateful when I was there. And by the way, I think when you are traveling, one of the things to remember is what makes any trip good is not necessarily the place, but the attitude that you bring there. The only thing that ever makes a trip bad is you're being anxious about it, or you're being worried, or you're being nervous. And if you just go with the sense that whatever happens, this is exciting, this is going to be fun, I'm going to be grateful that I get to be here, you'll have a good time no matter where you go.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I am very grateful for it. I'm grateful for your inspiration. I'm thinking that I may take you up on this practice. I have a signature birthday coming up, so this is a great time to start. That's our show for today. If it helped you think differently, will you help me? Go to the Seniority Authority page on your podcasting app and hit the plus, heart, favorite, or subscribe button so you don't miss out. And tell your friends so we can spread the word and spread the gratitude. Until then, enjoy the chance to get smarter about growing older.